Hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I have a truly special guest on. In fact, I don't think he really needs much introduction. I'm sure most people watching will recognize Rob, also known as sports card therapist, and he is pretty much everywhere that you can find sports card content nowadays. He has, of course, a YouTube channel, a podcast that's on iTunes and Spotify, and obviously you can also see him on Twitter and Instagram. Rob, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure having you on, and thank you for taking time out to do this interview because you seem like quite the busy man lately.
Listen, thank you very much for having me on, man. I'm super excited to be here, super excited for the invite. So thank you very much, man. I see the content that you're putting out as well, man, and you're doing a phenomenal job. So I'm pretty sure one day I might be working for you on the content side.
I don't know about that, but no, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for the kind words. Let's go ahead and start on your background as a content creator. What kind of got you started creating sports card content? What is it about doing that that you found really enjoyable?
Yeah, man. So I think similar to a lot of people, I jumped back into the hobby right at the beginning of the pandemic. I've collected on and off throughout my whole life. I could remember being, 4 years old and going to the card stores and, just going to card shows. And so I come from that culture. My father kind of raised me in that card collecting culture. So, I've done a couple podcasts over the course of my life, that were not sports card related. Had a radio show on college radio for 5 years, so it was kind of like it seemed like I mean, we're the sum of all of our experiences, So I think when I jumped into the hobby, about 2 to 3 years ago, I mean, I didn't just dip my foot in the water. I did a cannonball off the diving board and just kind of started collecting. I was up to my neck in Facebook groups and eBay and Instagram and all of that. And then finally I said, you know what? Like, this is becoming a real passion of mine. I can feel it. This is becoming a real passion. I think I'm going to start documenting my experience. And and that's just kind of where it went from there. I did not expect that I was going to be doing. I didn't expect I'd be here, that's for sure. But I figure the best way I can, learn and really truly get a grasp of the hobby was to just do it. I'm a very hands-on action kind of guy. I don't learn from PowerPoints. I learn from actually like doing things. So that's, I think, where the podcast kind of came into play.
And you call yourself sports card therapist, and you are actually a licensed therapist, correct?
Yep. Yeah. So I'm a licensed psychotherapist, licensed alcohol and drug counselor. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. So yeah, that's kind of like my day job, and I think when people think of a licensed therapist, I don't know what they think of. Usually don't think of someone like me. I mean, both arms tattoos and, I ride a Harley Davidson and, and I
Yeah.
curse, and things like that, but I tell you what, though, I think the clients I've worked with over the years, though, have really, I think that's something that might turn some people off, is that I'm like that, but I think it's kind of turned more people on. It's like they see me and they're like, I'm not talking to a therapist. And all of a sudden I walk through the door and like, all right, I'll give him a shot. He seems okay. I'll give him a shot, So, yeah, so I've been doing that now, for about 15 years.
Fantastic. Well, and I really liked the concept of sort of marrying the two ideas together of like, you know, if you're going to be in this hobby, if you want to be a collector, uh, figuring out the best ways to have sort of that balance, both on a mental standpoint, an emotional standpoint, and a financial standpoint, being the key to being in this long term. And so your take on that, and to have to make healthy choices for people, to try and help people make healthy choices in those aspects, is what I've really enjoyed about the content that you've put out.
Yeah, and for me, it's got to be about balance, right? I mean, I can't be so into the hobby as to where it's taking away from my family life, and I think that's something that probably a lot of us do struggle with. I mean, I know that's been a balancing act for me. I'm someone that, I put out 2 podcast episodes a week. I'm set up at shows usually once to twice a month. There's a lot of things that can pull you away in all different directions from your life when it comes to this hobby. So it is a bit of a balancing act. But life is a balancing act, and
Hmm.
I just need to make sure my priority list is, family, career, then hobby, because without anything before that, I can't have the hobby. I need to make sure that I'm in good standing with my family, and my family is a loving, functioning unit. I need to make sure that my job, I'm taking care of my responsibilities on that end, because without that end, that's really kind of what's helped fuel my hobby experience, is having the job and having the responsibility. So
Hmm.
it all kind of goes in order.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, obviously, making sure the things that are most important still take precedent in your life, but still being able to enjoy this in your free time on the side and those things. But there's also a good way to go about enjoying your time in the hobby, I believe. And unfortunately, a lot of people, especially a lot of people in these past couple of years, have gotten into it and have gotten burned out rather quickly because they don't have a good, proper mindset and emotional maturity about it, unfortunately. And they get into stuff that at a really high price, and they lose money on it, and they get discouraged and get out. All these things that have gone on that have been you know th- that have gotten even worse these past couple of years because of the volatility of the sports card market in particular. And so yeah, I hope that more people, if that are getting into this, listen to people such as yourself to try and help them better understand, how to sort of keep those things in balance so that they don't get burned out too fast.
Yeah. And I think, I have some friends, and they weren't friends before the hobby, but they're hobby friends that now I would consider friends. And, I can remember a year and a half ago looking at their collection and just being like, wow, man, their collection is incredible. I cannot believe these huge cards they have.
Hmm.
And over the course of the last year, I watched those cards go from 35K down to 10K. And
Hmm.
they bought at 35K because at one point it was at 50. At one
Hmm.
point it was a $50,000 card. So when they bought it at 35, they felt like, wow. And, I'm not going to say that I haven't had any losses over the course of the last year or two in this hobby, but knock on wood, I haven't had a loss that significant. I know one thing that I tried to do, even though I said I jumped in, off the diving board doing a cannonball, really what I meant by that was, I was trying to throw myself into all facets of the hobby. Luckily, I did not go out and make any massive purchases. They were kind of slow growing purchases, and I slowly leveled my way up. And that's been, I think, kind of my story, whether if it's, through the podcast, really, because the podcast is just me talking about what my journey's been. So my journey has really been just slowly leveling up, slowly consolidating, buying the things that, and doing things that I had to do to get to what I wanted to. And now it almost feels like I'm starting this new chapter in the hobby, because now it's like I have these, 6 to 10 big cards that really, there's a lot of card equity in these cards, right? And I don't want to move them. That, for me, they're long term holds. For me, um, you know, I I'm I want to see what they could do 10 years from now, 20 years from now, So that leaves me almost having to start over again, because I leveled up and consolidated so much that now there's almost nothing at the bottom. So what I've started doing is really trying to find my way into finding these like side PCs that I can really enjoy. And I tell you, I'm having more fun now in the hobby, I think, than I've ever had. And it's because I'm truly tapping into my nostalgia and starting these side PCs that almost, I mean, they're not breaking the bank. I almost feel like, I'm robbing them because I'm getting them so cheap.
Yeah. Well, in fact, let's talk about your collection. How would you best describe your collection at this point in time?
Let's see. I have, like I said, I probably have, probably about 10 cards that are 10 somewhat bigger cards. And then everything else is kind of like inventory, right? And
Mhm.
the inventory is stuff that's like, listen, if someone came and bought these all at 75% of comps right now, I would gladly give them away, like type
Mhm.
thing. Like I have no zero emotional tie to them. But when what helped me in the beginning was figuring out like, okay, I need a plan. And this is something that I do in my personal life and my professional life. Anytime I'm working with someone, right? If I'm working with a client, we sit down and we develop a treatment plan. So for me, I had to develop like a plan for myself or some goals. And regardless if I ever actually reach those goals, that's not the point. The point is at least I have direction. At least I know what I'm doing. I'm not just like blindly spending my money. So for me, that's why it's important to actually write down goals and write down a plan. So I had to figure out what my PC pyramid looked like. And if you look back on my Instagram or you listen back at some point in season 1 where I did them, I did this exercise that was like a PC pyramid. I borrowed the idea from someone of the hobby of a PC pyramid. So, basically it's just what it sounds like. So at the very top of my PC pyramid, really, well, my tagline's always goats over prospecting. So I never want to get stuck holding the bag. And we hear so many horror stories and we see them play out, like on Instagram, like whether if it's Trey Lance, people holding big Trey Lance cards, him getting injured, if it's Mac Jones getting benched, and all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, RIP to all the people holding Mac Jones cards, and it's like, I never want to get stuck kind of like holding the bag. So I like the whole goats concept. I love, and I have an emotional tie to the goats I collect. So, that's kind of where I've gone. And I've always had this love of vintage. So when you combine the two, vintage with goats, that kind of narrows down what it is I'm going toward. So that's kind of what my PC and what my collection looks like. It's I would say 75% vintage goats, and then the other 25% is probably a little bit more modern, but goats.
Hmm. Well, I know you have two cards that you recently acquired in your collection that I'm very jealous of. You've got the two Russell 61 Fleer cards, both
Yes.
signed. Those are two very high on my personal pyramid to get one of these days. So I'm very jealous you got those two cards recently.
Well, and thank you, man. And let me grab the auto real quick. Um, so I mean, every single card, and it's crazy because, and I talk about this a lot on my podcast about how, really when you talk about a big card and you walk around or you see someone has a big card, all you see is the big card, right? Like all you see is the big card. All you see is the Bill Russell PSA 4.
Mm-hmm.
This is the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
Right. This is the absolute tip that people see. No one sees or rarely thinks about the massive foundation of that iceberg that is basically invisible, that's underneath the water. Right. And that massive foundation are the countless dozens, if not hundreds of deals that I had to make in order to move up to something like this. Like I didn't just take $10,000 out of my pocket and buy this. Now,
Right.
I might have did that, but in order to get that 10,000, I had to sell a bunch of cards. And in order to get those cards I sold, I had to make a lot of deals. And in order to, so it's just like this, you throw a pebble in the water and it's just like this huge ripple effect. And all those ripples are all the deals that it took to finally get that. So, so I believe these are the two cards you are referring to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's the 1957 Topps rookie, and then this one, which is a second year card of his, right? It's a second year card because he only had 2 playing year cards because, as you being the basketball card nerd, they weren't making basketball cards every year because they didn't know if they were going to sell the way that baseball would or the way that football would. So when I came across this, and this took a lot of research on my part, finding this card. This took a lot of research. I knew I wanted this card, and I wanted it in a pretty good grade, which is the In Action 1961 Fleer. I knew I wanted it in a good grade, and as I'm looking through eBay, there was a single one for sale that was autographed.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about you, but I cannot stand when there's an autograph card and then right here it just says trading card and then it says the name of the guy. Like to me that like irks me. So I love when it specifically states what the card is, right? So and this one did. This one kind of hit all the numbers on it. So the negotiation for this card that I had with the guy actually took a few days, and we went back and forth. We ended up exchanging numbers. He had never sent the card through the mail before or did a deal off of eBay kind of thing. So it was like I had to kind of yeah, exactly. So yeah, and so those were big cards for me for sure to have. And so what is it about the Bill Russells that you hold so high? I'm kind of curious, you being the basketball card nerd.
Yeah, I mean it's both. I have obviously my own personal, like list of my favorite all-time basketball players, and it's pretty similar to what most people's lists are. Russell's near the top. I really want a on-card rookie autograph of all of my favorites basketball players of all time, and so
good luck with that.
I know when it comes to the Russell one, that's going to take quite a while probably to achieve. And then his 61, I'm also collecting all the 61 Fleer basketball cards signed that I possibly can because it's my favorite all-time set. And it's quite the challenge.
Do you have any of the big ones right now?
I've got Oscar, his rookie cards autographed. I have quite a few of some pretty rare ones that are hard to find, like Dolph Schayes, Bob Boozer, Larry Costello. A bunch of those type of names that probably the casual fan aren't too familiar with. I'm waiting for,
you're set collecting 61 Fleer auto.
Yes. And I know that seems a little crazy. It's not an endeavor that a lot of people take because it's not for the faint of heart. Though it is mathematically possible now to have a complete set, but there are quite a few Pop 1, Pop 2s still of that set.
I would imagine the hardest is probably Wilt, right? Is that the hardest one to get?
He's not technically the hardest, but he is definitely the most expensive now. Both his base and his In Action ones, they're through the roof right now. I think the last base rookie autograph one sold at Heritage last month for a little over $100,000. It's just like crud. It just keeps going up, and that's gonna be a hard one to get. But there are several.
And that was last month.
Yeah, that was like last month's Heritage auctions. I think that whatever one that ended like last month or maybe the month before, something like that.
So that was after, the market's been correcting, right? So that was after the market correction. That's during a recession.
Yes.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Because those are truly the hard ones to find, and the ones that the people that are like true collectors and are looking for those to put into their PCs for like forever or for many, many years at least. Those are the ones that people are still going after, and finding the really rare guys in a set like that, they still cost a lot of money. Even a guy like Phil Jordan, who isn't really well known to a lot of people that aren't hardcore NBA historians or whatever, but because like his 61 Fleer is like a pop two, because unfortunately he passed away like 1966 or 1967. He passed away really young, and so yeah, his two that are out there almost never come up for sale, but one actually did come up for sale at Mile High auction a few months ago, and it sold for like almost $3,000, I think. So just like a no-name common player, but people who know about that card and it coming out to be sold finally for the first time in years, people will pay a high price point for it still.
I tell you, it's one of those things. I think it's just the collector in us. I don't know if it's the hoarder in us, if it's the sports historian in us, but
Mm-hmm.
every time I have a guest on and I, talk to them about something that's like incredibly rare and unique, I had a guy on a couple months back, and I think you had him on too. I think I saw when I was scrolling through your episodes, the 1933 Gaudi autographed
Yeah.
guy. Man,
Mm-hmm.
immediately I started searching for them on eBay. Even just to get the like the lesser known guys, the commons and stuff. And I'm like, okay, I'm way out of my league here. I'm not even going to bother with this. And I could remember getting a Joe Tinker T206 card. And Tinker, he's one of the bigger names in the T206 set, and I got it like in a trade, half cash, half trade thing. I think I paid like $1,000 for it or something like that. And I was like, I think I want to start collecting T206 cards. I think that's going to be my thing. Like, I think I'm going to try to, and then I go on a Facebook page and people are like, oh, selling my T206 set. Here are all the prices listed individually, and like added up to like 200,000. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to start collecting T206s just to do it. Like, okay, I need to
Yeah.
be more responsible with my money, and
Yeah, and Marty is the guy who is the Sign 33 collector. He actually lives very close to me, and so he and I have had a lot of conversations. And when I was talking about focusing my collection or really pivoting, I really kind of did an actual pivot into autograph cards, in particular that 61 Fleer set. And yeah, his advice to me was just be patient and take your time. It's like, don't try buy everything at once,
I
because
think he told me it took him about, I think he's been doing it 8 or 9 years, and
Mhm.
he's or something like that. That kind of rings a bell to me, and he's got almost a full set. But what I will say is, I don't know if you have a Bill Russell or not, the 61 base Bill Russell, but I do know a guy that has one, and it's the same guy I bought the inaction from, but he wanted 10 grand for his, and I said, I don't think I'm going to do that. And then I saw one just went on auction that just went for, I think it was on MC Sports Cards. I don't think it was Probstein. I think it was MC Sports Cards, and I was going to bid on it, and it actually only went for like 4,500.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa, that seems cheap. So I've been contemplating going back to this guy now and being like, listen, here's the deal. That's what that one sold for. I will
Mhm.
pay you what that one sold for if you want. But I don't know. Point being, I could always give you that lead if that's something you're looking for.
I would appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah. I haven't gotten the Russell just yet. And I have been kind of trying to be patient on some of the bigger ones like Russell and West, and a couple others. Because
There's
I
a
do think,
million Wests out there, though. I see them everywhere. I think you can find probably like 10 of them on eBay right now. And
yeah.
not even just the reprint version, but the original version.
Yeah, I'm biding my time on some of those because, yeah, you're right. I mean, I think I can be patient, and I think I can get a West and a Russell at some point for a pretty good deal. I only really go hard after the things that are like a pop 10 and less. When those come up, I'm like trying everything I possibly can to get that card then and now, no matter what the price is. And I
Yeah.
think that's just sort of, I think what you got to do when you're trying to collect something that's really hard and unique and rare, like a set like that, is just like go for the really rare stuff first and be patient on everything else, because everything else will fluctuate, and you'll probably find a much better deal down the road for Bill Russell, or even for Wilt. You never know. I don't know when that may happen, but I'm going to be patient and take my time and just seeing if down the road, a few years from now, if something can happen, a miracle perhaps.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is with vintage too, it's so difficult because, when it comes to vintage cards, people, they know what they have. They know what they have. They're not going to let go of things cheap. Most vintage collectors are not going to panic when the market is up and down, up and down. Like they've kind of been down this road before, and there's a remarkable calm in the vintage community when the market feels like it's in turmoil. And, I can't say the same when it comes to the modern collector or even the super modern, collector community. Everything is so driven on hype and grading. And when it comes to vintage, everything is really just about eye appeal and scarcity.
Yeah, and yeah, a lot of vintage collectors have been doing this for decades, where they know almost everything there is to know about their particular cards or sets or whatever that they are personally collecting. They are all like a wealth of knowledge and almost like historians of their own particular PC, much more so than any other collector out there. Seems like modern collectors, they don't go to the research depths that a lot of vintage collectors go to when they are fixated on particular cards or particular sets.
Yeah.
Well, and we were discussing the really rare things to try and go after, and you've got one of your big PC ones behind you, just over your shoulder, the LeBron James Ultimate Collection rookie.
Yes.
I know you've talked a lot about it on your podcast and your YouTube channel, but I mean, just if you could just kind of briefly kind of talk about what was it like? What was how did you feel about adding a card like that to your collection?
Oh, I tell you, man, sometimes it still feels surreal, to own a card of that magnitude. And, without a doubt, I'm a collector at heart, but, I've heard it put this way, and I immediately identified with it that, I feel like I'm a hybrid. I'm a collector and I'm an investor, because I think when you collect to the level and to the point that like we do, where I know that I do, I need to be responsible with the way I'm looking at things. So I think it's important that as an investor, as far as that side goes, if I'm spending big money on a card, then I need to at the very least envision some sort of exit strategy if need be, right? Like I think I owe it to myself and to my family to be financially at least responsible and kind of see the big picture when it comes to, the money that we spend on cards. So when it came to this LeBron, I think it was more of an investor piece, and that's just kind of what it came down to. It was more of an investor piece. I have a friend that, before the boom, I want to say probably about 2019, he purchased a LeBron RPA. He purchased the Exquisite, the 03 Exquisite LeBron RPA. He purchased it for $140,000. Right. Then the boom happens. 18 months later, he sold it for $1.3 million.
Oof.
That's just like, that gets your heart beating, right? Like, I'm sure if you made that kind of flip, you'd probably buy your will at that point, right? You'd buy your will and get it over with. So
I'd be buying a will plus my dream home plus a lot of other things. Yeah, that's like life-changing money. Yeah.
So he 10x'd his money with that. So that got me thinking, well, first of all, I've always loved LeBron. I'm a LeBron stan. To me, LeBron can do very little wrong. The only time I've ever truly criticized LeBron that I can remember is when I felt like he was passing too much in the
Mhm.
finals. You know, like you can dominate this game. You can literally drive to the basket every single play. No one will stop you. No one will stop you, and you can probably score 70 to 80 points a game. Why are you dishing it out to name any bum he was playing with, right? Like, why are you dishing it out to him for a three? Like, so that was my only complaint. I've always loved LeBron though. So taking that, what my buddy did,
Mhm.
I said, you know what? I did some research and I said, you know what? This is probably LeBron's most coveted, most rare and scarce autograph. The Upper Deck
Mhm.
Ultimate Collection on card auto out of 250. So
Mhm.
I'm not thinking I can 10x my money anytime soon. But I think that if there was a card that had the potential to do that, it would probably be between that and like maybe like the limited logo
Mhm.
LeBron, like maybe one of the limited logos. But I went with the Ultimate Collection. So I put it out there. We have a podcast, you have a platform, so I was able to kind of use that to my advantage to at least, and when I say advantage, I mean like just get some leads, because these cards don't pop up for sale.
Mhm.
They just don't pop up for sale. So through putting it out there on the podcast, I was able to get connected. I got a ton of leads. They were leading nowhere though. And then
Mhm.
eventually ended up getting a lead on that card. And yeah, I mean, I would like to see this card, maybe 5X, maybe 5X over the course of the next 5 or 10 years. He has, I mean, maybe they make the play. Maybe he makes a playoff run one last time. Maybe his son comes to the NBA and they play together. We all know he's going to pass Kareem for the all-time scoring leader, right? Then
Yeah.
he's going to retire. Then he's going to eventually be elected into Springfield, Massachusetts, the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. So he's got a lot of things coming up that I think can probably help propel his card
Yeah.
prices, and especially that card. So that's definitely more of an investor piece for me. And just like anything else, I really set that goal to do that, and I put it out in the universe. And I'm not really a hokey kind of guy that's burning incense everywhere, but I believe in the law of attraction. I believe that if you put it out there into the universe, that as long as you're willing to bring the shovel, good things can happen.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a good choice. I mean, yeah, the exquisite RPA has obviously gotten a lot of attention over the years, these past couple of years in particular. People tend to not be as familiar with his other. There's a lot of other high end rookie stuff, and um, just things that are really rare, really hard to find in great condition from his rookie year. And his on card autographs aren't very many because he only did the exclusive deal with Upper Deck. So there's only like a handful of Upper Deck products from that
Hmm.
year that has his on card autograph. And so yeah, they a lot of his other rookie. I mean, the exquisite RPAs come out almost every other auction because everyone's trying to make money off of that one because it always is listed as like the card that's broke the record or did better than this auction from the previous auction. But his other ones like the Ultimate Collection, I think there's a lot of potential for huge growth on those. And LeBron's market has been kind of weird lately for some reason. I don't quite understand it because he will break Kareem's record this year for the all-time greatest scorer in NBA history. He's going to go down as like if not number one, number two on pretty much everyone's list of greatest players that have ever played the game of basketball. Um, I don't understand why his particular market has fluctuated as much as it has been recently. It's strange to me, and I've told other people it's like if you got a chance to go buy some LeBron stuff, I think you should definitely do it right now. I think it's a good time to do it.
Yeah, and I think there's probably three reasons that come to mind why his market went down so high. And to go back to what you said, I don't think anyone's ever going to be able to crack that top two list, right? I mean, I think most lists are
Yeah.
Jordan being number one and LeBron two. I just
Hmm.
I just don't know how a player will ever be able to come in the league and be able to, kind of crack that
Yeah.
list, but then again, who knows, because you could easily throw Kareem in that number 2 spot or that number 1 spot, Bill Russell. And, sometimes really the fans are the ones that kind of dictate that, but I think with LeBron, the reason why his prices kind of went down a little bit is, and what's really hurt his legacy, I think he might arguably be number 1 on most people's lists if he didn't switch teams so much. I think him switching teams have hurt his prices. I think the Lakers being so bad last season hurt his prices, and I think
It's funny. That's funny to me. It's like people reacting to Tom Brady because Tampa Bay isn't very good this year. That's just silly to me. That's
I agree.
Whatever. Yeah.
I agree, but I mean, why are Jalen Hurts cards going for 10x the most expensive John Elway card of all time?
Right.
Like, okay, it doesn't make sense at all. I saw one statistic that was like, if you added up Montana's top card, Peyton Manning's top card, Elway's top card, Steve Young's top card, like Marino's top card of all time, if you combined all of those, it still didn't sell for as much as Herbert's top card is sold for. It's like, oh my God. And the crazy thing is too, right? Like, it really feels like, I don't know if you want to call it a junk wax 2.0 or if it's like a junk slab era, but I mean, when you look at the fact that, I see statistics that are like, Trevor Lawrence has 1,300 one-of-ones.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you owned like a Trevor Lawrence or a Justin Herbert 1-of-1, you'd be feeling really good. But then you find out that there's like 1,300 other variations of that. Like, how much money do you actually think your 1-of-1's going to be worth 5 years from now?
Right.
So,
I agree. Yeah, it's all really kind of silly when you think about it in that sort of way, in my opinion. Which is why, like I said, I think it's important for people who are getting into this and really passionate about it to really step out and try and think of everything with a mindset of like, are these things really going to be important 5 years from now, 10 years from now, down the road? I mean, I guess if you're in it just to make money and make quick flips, then, yeah, I can definitely understand still valuing going after the things that people are still most attracted to right now, which is always going to be the players that are doing really well at this point in time, no matter what. But I mean, I think to be a healthy investor and collector, you've got to really just try and step back, look at the data, look at sales trends, think about what was popular 10 or 15 years ago from today and what's still popular from that era, and try and think, well, what is going to be popular now 15, 20 years down the road that's out there right now. And it's always hard to say exactly, but there are ways that you can tell, like, okay, I don't think that prism based PSA 10s are going to hold their popularity down the road, based off of just the fact that we kind of went through this era before with overprinting and over just saturation of certain cards. Like the Shaquille O'Neal rookie card still hasn't recovered the way people, I think, thought that they probably would at some point, because, there's just too many of them. The same is going to be true for pretty much all the guys that have been coming into these leagues ever since like 2018 or whatever,
I was clicking on Card Ladder last night, just kind of clicking around, and I think it's because in someone's story sale I saw a Luka Prism base rookie PSA 10 for sale, and it was only like $340. And I'm like, man, those have fallen. And I'm like, you know what? Let me go on Card Ladder. Let me go check the pop on a PSA 10. So for the 2018 Luka Prism rookie PSA 10, there's 18,000 of them, and then PSA 9s of the same card, there's 14,000 of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
32,000 PSA 9 and 10s.
Yeah. uh, yeah, it's like I think any person who can do deductive reasoning and logical thinking just go and look at those numbers and be like, yeah, I don't think I don't think people 5 years from now, 10 years from now will be spending hundreds and thousands of dollars on those type of cards, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, I think on the only way that they're going to retain any value whatsoever are going to be the people that came into the hobby around the time of the boom when they were super explosive and maybe either got their hands on them and were able to make some money off them or never could get them. It's the same reason why an 89 Upper Deck Griffey still kind of has an appeal,
Mm-hmm.
right? But I mean, you
Yeah.
could get a PSA 9 for $200. You can get a PSA 8 for 120. And I own a couple of them. And the only reason why I own a couple of them is not for financial reasons. It's because I know growing up I could never afford the Upper Deck. I had 15 tops versions. I had 15 fleers. I had 15 scores, but I never
Mm-hmm.
had the Upper Deck because the Upper Deck was always about 85 to $90, and I
Mm-hmm.
never had the money for the Upper Deck. So the only reason that nostalgia, right? That goes back to nostalgia. I think
Yeah.
that's the only way the Luca base Prism will ever have any appeal in the future is when people are going to remember like the boom, and they're going to correlate that card with the boom.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I don't want to take too much more of your time, but I did have one more question that I really wanted to ask you because you now go out and you go to a lot of card shows and you go around the country. So that's been a hot topic in the hobby lately. It has been card show attendance, the types of deals, the amount of money that's being exchanged now at card shows now comparatively to what it was this time, last year, for instance. So, what have you been seeing with some of the recent card shows that you have been attending lately?
Good question for sure, and it's something I've been talking about on my pod, and I know friends of mine have been as well. I think lately I'm seeing a lot less money spent. There's a lot less exchange of cash, which makes sense. Totally
Yeah.
makes sense, right? I mean, on multiple fronts. We've
Mhm.
been in a recession now for probably about a good year, whether or not it's documented as a year or not. They usually say you don't know you're in a recession until you're about 6 to 9 months into one, right? So we're probably going on close to a year of being in a recession. The market has continued to go down, which means, comps have been just continued to go down. So people, I think dealers that are set up don't want to sell their cards at what regular comps are for the most part,
Mhm.
because a few months earlier they paid more money for those, and it just doesn't make sense. Like, I think people would rather hold. People would rather hold than sell. So I'm seeing a lot less cash exchanged. I am seeing less foot traffic as well. I'm seeing
Yeah.
less foot traffic. Um, I think that's just kind of what it comes down to. I think probably in the last 12 months or so, maybe 12 to 18 months, I think the hobby's kind of shrunken a little bit. And I
Mhm.
think the people that came in during the boom that were in it for more financial reasons, which is fine, right? Like if they came in here because they were trying to make money and they were putting money into the hobby, I mean, I think anytime anyone's putting money into the hobby, that's a good thing because we need that, right? We need
Mhm.
dealers, we need flippers, because if it wasn't for dealers and flippers and whatnot, I mean, it would be really hard, I think, for cards to move around and find a forever home.
Yeah.
And eventually cards do find their forever home. So as far as shows, I think there's less money being exchanged. I think there's more
Mhm.
trading happening, which is cool because, say Kurt buys a card for $1,000, now it's worth 500. He
Mhm.
doesn't want to sell that card for $500 because he's going to be taking a 50% loss on what he paid for it. But now
Mhm.
here Rob comes and I have a card that's valued at 500, and this card is down almost 50% as well. you want out of your card. You're sick of looking at your card. It makes you sick to your stomach knowing you've lost 50%. But then here comes Rob, who lost 50%. And now we can start talking trades here. And now it doesn't feel as bad. Now it kind of feels like, you know what? We can still curate our collections without shelling out cash and without really taking a loss on the card that we have in our possession now. So still being able to trade, I think, is kind of like this hack when it comes to, a down market.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up because, I mean, obviously less cash exchanging hands right now makes all the sense in the world given our economic times. But I remember I went to a trade night a little over a month ago, and
Which trade night?
Oh, it was a local trade night here in the Central Arkansas area. It's actually a new shop that opened up just within the past year, and they had their first trade night. And it wasn't well attended, unfortunately, but there were opportunities to do trade deals that didn't seem to exist previously from some of the other card shows and trade nights that I had gone to recently. So I had quite a few things that I had bought within the past year or so. And so I was, down in value on pretty much every single one of those things that I bought.
Mm-hmm.
But I was able to package quite a few of them and trade up for a Kevin Durant rookie Ultimate Collection autograph. At one point, it was VGS 9. And at one point, I think that card was valued at well over $10,000. And at that point, when I finally went to that trade night and saw that, it was valued at a little over $3,000. And
wow.
I packaged quite a few things, like I said, that I had bought for $1,000, but now was worth, 500, 700, something along those lines. And I was able to use those to get into that KD card. And I was really happy about that. And really, it felt like a deal that wouldn't have been available to me had I had tried to do that, a year ago or whatever,
Yeah, and I tell you what, I mean, I think we're all, I'll speak for myself. I know I'm feeling the financial pinch, of just what it is. Luckily, I have a steady job where my hours haven't been cut, so I'm still making the same money, but I'm paying more for gas, I'm paying more for groceries. Everything's kind of gone up. So even people with steady jobs are feeling the pinch. But when I look at the fact that there's a down market, no one wants to lose money on their cards. But for me, I feel like there's opportunity there. For me, I feel like, maybe I can take advantage of some of these down prices and try to pick up some bigger cards, because I think about the people that, in the last couple of years that I've met that have $500,000 collections, their collections were probably only valued around 50 to 100K 5 years ago. It wasn't until the boom happened that, so I'm definitely, thinking long term, and same thing as a content creator, just like you are. I'm sure, it's like, well, there's probably going to be a lot of people leaving the hobby. There's a lot of podcasts that are dropping off. There's a lot of content creators that have kind of disappeared. And as long as I stay consistent, and consistency is key, right? Especially if you're creating content. But as long as I keep doing what I'm doing, when the next boom happens, whether if it's when Fanatics takes over, because they're talking about growing the hobby 10x, or whether if it's just, who knows what another boom the reason will be for. But when there's another boom, here's going to be Basketball Card Nerd at the forefront for content creators, because he's been so consistent over the years. And by the way, his collection went from being 150,000 to now he's flirting with $1 million collection. And I think that's what happened with a lot of people. So they were able to really capitalize on the boom. And so kudos to them. They were in it and in it harder than I was before I was. So I can't do nothing but tip my hat to them.
Yep, absolutely. And I agree with all that. I think that's a pretty good stopping point. Was there anything else you wanted to make sure to mention about just anything you've been collecting recently, or just things you want to make sure to plug or talk about that you'll be doing in the near future?
No, no, not really, man. I'm just, I think, like I said, as far as what I've been collecting, I'm just finding really cool, smaller pockets that really tap into my nostalgia.
Hmm.
I was never, I couldn't stand to collect Eli Manning when he was playing because as a Giants fan, he gave me heartbreak season after season, and I was so frustrated with him. I screamed, I hate Eli Manning so many times at the TV screen during games. And,
Hmm.
but now that he's retired, I could look back
Hmm.
on it and say, man, he brought us two Super Bowls. And I just love the guy, so
Yeah.
it just taps into nostalgia for me. So my Eli collection has just grown tenfold, and that's really just been in the last like 6 to 10 months. I've been able to get some incredible Eli cards for dirt cheap, dirt cheap because prices are down and there aren't a ton of Eli collectors out there, and same thing with some of my Yankee guys. I mean, I'm collecting now, Phil Rizzuto, I have a 52 Bowman. I literally just opened before we came on the air, and I'm collecting almost every single Phil Rizzuto card there is, going from his rookie all the way up into his last playing year. And I'm having a blast doing it, so I'm finding ways to stay involved in the hobby without paying paying a mortgage payment,
Hmm.
without fully dropping, a lot of money. And that's what I would urge people to do is, nostalgia, man, it's a powerful drug for sure.
Yeah, it
But
is.
yeah. But yeah, so sports card therapist, feel free to look me up, Instagram, Twitter, anywhere that you're probably checking out Basketball Nerd, you could probably find me. And Kurt, man, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on, man. It was great. I love your content. Keep up the good work, man.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And yeah, thank you so much for your time today.